Sidechain compression is a really commonly used mixing trick, and for good reason. It's really powerful. It's a great way to mix things together and give space for something that you want to be a bit more dominant in the mix. But it's not always the best option. Sometimes you want a little bit more control over specific parts of a sound. And a great way to do that is by using an envelope follower in combination with an EQ. So in this example, I've got a kick that's going through this compressor and ducking my bass line every time the kick comes through. And it's dropping the whole signal of the bass. Any good upper harmonics that I actually want to be in that bass are getting cut out every time the kick cuts through. So I'm going to turn this compressor off and show you an alternative. In this case, I think our bass primary or dominant frequency is around 50 hertz. So I'm going to set a band on EQ8 to roughly 50 hertz. And what we're going to automate here is the gain. We're essentially making a multi-band compressor. If you take the envelope follower and map it to the gain of that EQ band that we just set, and then open up this little audio routing section and sidechain it to our kick, and then dial up this mix dial. Now we'll be able to see every time the kick cuts through, it's going to go through the envelope follower and then automate the EQ band gain that we just mapped. Now that's all well and good, except at the moment it's basically running in reverse. So you want to change the way that the envelope follower is impacting that gain. We essentially want it to start from 0, which in this case is 50%, because this is halfway between either side of the parameter values that the gain could be set to. And we want it to be ducking downwards. So we want it to be going from 50 to 0%. Think about this is 50, this is 100, and this is 0. So now when the kick cuts through, it should be ducking that bass in that EQ band. If you found this helpful and you think you'd benefit from mixing tricks like these in the context of a full start to finish mixdown, I've got a complete mixdown course. There's a link in my bio if you want to read more about that. Then basically just work with the rise, fall, and gain on your envelope follower to really dial in exactly as much gain reduction as you want. And then you can even work with the Q on your EQ band to really get a specific and narrow gain reduction if you really want to. But then you can get really creative with this. If you also feel like you want a very specific section of the punch of that kick to cut through the bass, you can create another map and map that to the gain of a different EQ band, set the same parameters, and then you've got two separate EQ bands, one for the sort of body of the kick and one for the punch of the kick, if that's what you really want. Now, this isn't a perfect example of when to use this trick. I think with this sub bass, you probably could just get away with using a standard compressor or just one band like we had initially set up. But imagine a track with a really complex bass or a sweeping synth that does duck into that low end, and you do want the kick just to cut through a very specific part of that low end. That's when I would use a tool like this. Or perhaps in a situation where you've got lots of high-end percussion competing with each other, like hats and claps and rides, you can take very specific parts of those sounds and use them to duck very specific parts of other sounds that they're competing with.